Why does everyone want to sell ice cream? Is it just because it's such a good business?
Looking back at the development of ice cream in China, I think it has actually gone through 3 waves. The third wave, in my view, is the opportunity for freshly made ice cream that has emerged over the past 5 to 10 years.
People often say that Japan's economy has lost 30 years, but ice cream has only lost 10 years, which shows it's still a pretty good business.
Hello listeners, I'm Xiaoqi from HeyGen Capital. In this episode, we plan to talk about a topic that many of you are probably very interested in right now, the ice cream business. We've noticed that every year the weather seems to get hotter than the year before, and ice cream has become an essential part of staying cool. This year, in fact, we've observed that China's ice cream consumer market is also undergoing some significant changes. From my own experience, we've noticed that the ice cream brands in shopping malls seem to have all changed. Brands that used to be common, like Häagen-Dazs and another one called Yili, are now rarely seen. Another thing we've noticed is that the frozen ice cream products in freezers have also changed. The brands we grew up with, like Yili for example, Mengniu also seems to be getting less and less common. And in their place are things like store brands such as Hima's own ice cream, and some more expensive foreign brands like Meiji. So, my personal feeling this year is that there are an incredible number of choices when it comes to ice cream. For this episode, we've also invited HeyGen Capital. We have investor Danny, our old friend, and also our research director Dongzi, who will share perspectives from Japanese market research and from the new trends in the ice cream sector that investors are paying attention to. Let's discuss the changes happening in the ice cream market from these two viewpoints. All right, let's have Dongzi and Danny say hello to everyone first.
Hello everyone, I'm Dongzi from HeyGen Capital.
Hello everyone, I'm Danny from HeyGen Capital.
All right, I've actually said quite a bit just now, mainly to kick off this topic. Let's start by sharing our own personal experiences. I know that Dongzi, for example, really likes eating ice cream. So could you talk a bit about your own observations and feelings?
Yeah, every time I eat ice cream, it's like a battle between my true nature or desires and myself. Because after all, eating it will make you gain weight. But still, every time I go out, like when I'm taking a walk in the neighborhood at night, I can't help but check out what's new in the 7-Eleven freezer. I find that for me, the chances of choosing Magnum are pretty high. And the flavors also seem to have become richer than before. And sometimes I might want to eat Häagen-Dazs, but in China it usually costs about 35 to 40 yuan, whereas in Japan it's generally sold for around 15 yuan. So I feel like, wow, that's so expensive, almost like a luxury item. Even though I've seen it many times, I basically never bought it. Anyway, when I eat ice cream myself, recently I've been buying the one from Hema, the inverted triangle cone, which actually tastes pretty good. Hema's, and also this Kashi yogurt ice cream, but this one might be a bit too sweet. I highly recommend that Hema's buy as benchmark against Japanese products. There's a convenience store called Mini Stop, and their private label ice cream tastes especially good.
Yeah, that's right. Since last year, I've also been paying attention to the ice cream sector, so I've tried a lot of different ice cream brands myself. Gaining weight from eating ice cream could be considered part of the job, I guess. So I think the ice cream market is really booming right now. As you mentioned, there are so many new brands and a lot of new flavors coming out. For example, there are flavors like pistachio, matcha, and a lot of different fruit flavors. I think most people probably try these new flavors for the first time at the mall. Of course, if you're buying ice cream frequently, you gradually start purchasing it on online platforms as well. For example, recently, I've also been buying ice cream from a small neighborhood supermarket near my home. Every time, I order their pistachio and black tea flavored ice cream on Meituan. After discounts, each cup only costs 7 yuan. The taste is actually quite authentic, and it really satisfies your cravings when you're at home. Actually, just now, both of you.
Both of you mentioned the price of this ice cream. I think this is actually a topic that everyone cares about. For example, when Zhongshuigao first came out, a lot of people criticized it for being an ice cream assassin because of its price. So I have a small question for you. What do you think is a reasonable price for an ice cream?
Well, I think if it's in a convenience store freezer, maybe 5 or 6 yuan is a price I can accept. When I was a kid, it was usually 2 or 3 yuan, or even cheaper, like 50 cents. But considering the dairy content in ice cream, the amount of milk actually has a big impact on both the healthiness and the taste, as well as how appealing it is. So if it's because of the cost of ingredients, I think 5 or 6 yuan is probably my standard.
But Magnum costs 8 yuan.
Maybe I'm not that sensitive to the difference between 5 yuan and 8 yuan.
Got it. So as long as it's under 10 yuan, it's fine. Okay.
I think it depends on the situation. For example, if it's retail ice cream, my acceptable price range is probably similar to Dongzi's, maybe 5 to 10 yuan. But if it's specialty ice cream, like in shopping malls, airports, train stations, or some special channels, I think I can accept a higher price because specialty ice cream is, after all, something you buy less frequently. So I can accept it being maybe 5 yuan more expensive than tea drinks. For example, for mid to high end positioning, selling at 20 or 30 yuan for a scoop or a cup in a shopping mall, I think that's acceptable.
Hey, what Danny just said is actually quite interesting to me. He mentioned that the price he can accept for ice cream is 5 yuan more than that of tea drinks. Why would there be such a feeling? I don't quite understand it. Maybe for me personally, I think ice cream and tea drinks satisfy the same need for me. I feel like the two should be about the same, but in reality, it does seem like ice cream, especially specialty ice cream, is a bit more expensive than tea drinks. Why is that? Is it because there aren't as many ice cream brands as there are tea drink brands? Or because the competition isn't as fierce? Or is there another reason?
Yes, I think part of it is due to the intense competition. Tea drinks have actually been subdivided into very specific price ranges, right? For example, there's Mixu for under 10 yuan, then there are brands around 15 yuan, and then there are slightly more premium ones around 20 yuan, like Bawang Tea Table or previously Hey Tea. Now, brands like Amo Shuzuo and Ku Chashan are probably in the 20 to 25 yuan price range. So tea drinks have already been divided into three price tiers. But if we look at branded ice cream, there are actually roughly these three price ranges as well. For example, there's Pobeice at around 15 yuan, DQ at about 20 yuan, and Wildman at around 30 yuan. Right, they're basically about 5 yuan more expensive than the three price tiers for tea drinks. I think one reason might be what Xiaoqi just mentioned, because the competition in ice cream isn't as cutthroat as it is in tea drinks, right? The tea drink market has already entered a stage of intense price wars and supply chain competition. Another reason might be that the consumption frequency for ice cream is actually lower, right? For tea drinks, people might have them every day or at least every week. But for ice cream, I think the repurchase frequency is probably more like once a month. So because the consumption frequency is lower, your sensitivity to price is relatively higher.
That's quite interesting. So, here's a question. After discussing so many phenomena just now, I'd like to ask both of you to briefly summarize what kind of changes are currently happening in our ice cream market. And why are these changes happening?
I think if we look back at the development of ice cream in China, it has actually gone through three major waves. The first wave was in the 1980s and 1990s, marked by the rise of industrialized ice cream. The main players at that time were foreign brands like Nestle and Unilever, which entered China and began selling their products. These packaged ice cream products started to appear, and domestic brands like Mengniu and Yili also began expanding from dairy products into ice cream. Before this, ice cream mostly came in forms we remember from childhood, like those freezers in mum and pop stores or ice pops in bags. Then the second wave probably came around the year 2000 with the rise of retail ice cream. We saw brands like Häagen-Dazs and Dairy Queen entering China, and at that time their arrival was extremely popular. Those once wildly popular foreign brands entered the market, but if we look back now, take Häagen-Dazs for example, it actually isn't very much like a restaurant style or freshly made ice cream. It's more of a fast-moving consumer good. They open stores and shopping malls, but what they sell is industrially produced ice cream, brought in by the tub and then scooped out for customers. So it's still a rather traditional industrial distribution model. Right, and then the third wave, I think, is the opportunity for freshly made ice cream that has emerged in the past 5 to 10 years. This also includes more specific categories like Italian gelato or the concept of freshly handmade ice cream. For example, high-end brands such as the Italian Venchi, right? They open in luxury malls in China, right? And there are also some that we see now. We also see some new generation domestic ice cream brands like Yuren, which focus on health and nutrition, as well as those that offer emotional value. I think the development of ice cream has actually gone through these three stages.
Yes, just now we actually mentioned the phase of freshly made ice cream at the end. From what I understand, the term freshly made ice cream is something that has only appeared in recent years. Maybe when we were kids, us born in the 90s, the so-called freshly made ice cream we could get was actually just freshly scooped ice cream. You probably never even thought about whether it's freshly made or not. It just wasn't something you considered. But you would notice that the ice cream scooped fresh for you by the staff was several times more expensive than the ones you bought from the freezer. There's a set of data here. We've observed that some of the established ice cream brands have actually experienced a significant decline. And within this, we can also find similar reference points from certain historical trends. So let's have Dongzi share some of his observations with us.
Right, because as we've mentioned, the ice cream market has undergone changes. I think the most prominent change is that the entire retail ice cream sector has reached a turning point. Just now, Danny also summarized the three waves of development in China's ice cream industry. Indeed, although the current situation for ice cream is quite good, on the other hand, retail ice cream is facing significant challenges. We saw that in 2024, Yili's annual ice cream sales dropped by 18%, and Mengniu's fell by 14%. This downward trend is happening across many brands, and it may even continue in the coming years. So why has this turning point occurred? I think this is a question that still needs to be answered. And I believe that Japan actually has some experiences in this area that we can refer to.
For example, could you elaborate?
In fact, a similar turning point in the ice cream market also happened in Japan. Back in 1994, Japan experienced an exceptionally hot summer. That year, the total market size reached about 430 billion yen, hitting its peak. By 2003, the total market size had dropped to 330 billion yen. In other words, over those 10 years, Japan's ice cream market shrank by about 100 billion yen. Within the industry, this period in Japan is actually referred to as the lost decade. The Japanese always like to talk about losing something.
The Japanese are always losing things?
Yes, always losing. So actually, there are some reasons behind this phenomenon. There are indeed some similarities with the situation China is currently facing. On this level, I think it has some reference value.
So you just mentioned that ice cream lost another decade. What are some of the main reasons behind this loss?
Actually, there are three main reasons behind this. One is the aging of the product system. Another is the evolution of Japan's entire sales and distribution system. And finally, changes in the front-end channels. First of all, from a product perspective, actually, up until the early 1990s, Japanese ice cream brands were basically living off their past achievements. They didn't put in much effort and mainly targeted children and some young female consumers with their products. However, with the trend of declining birth rates and people paying more attention to health, they didn't take the initiative to enhance the value of ice cream or expand their target audience. This is the first reason. The second point is about changes in retail channels or the distribution chain. Just like what's happening in China now, the entire traditional distributor system has collapsed. It's become very difficult for small and medium-sized distributors to survive, because overall market demand is declining. Back in 2003 in Japan, the country's largest retail ice cream distributor went bankrupt, which was quite a representative and significant event. The last point is actually the overall change in distribution channels, which is also very similar to the current situation in China. At that time in Japan, the hypermarket channel began to decline, and many small mom-and-pop stores were also on the decline. Therefore, the traditional strategies that ice cream companies excelled at, such as securing large shelf space in hypermarkets and dominating the shelves of mom-and-pop stores, became ineffective. As a result, the total number of shelves selling ice cream across society decreased, which naturally led the entire market into a period of contraction.
What Dongzi just mentioned actually really resonates with the transformation we're seeing in China's distribution channels today. Yes, and this also answers Dongzi's earlier question about which brands, actually, overall ice cream sales are declining year on year, but as we enter a buyer's market, channel-driven, private label ice cream brands are likely growing rapidly. For example, if we look at the top 10 best-selling ice cream products at HEMA right now, about half of them are already HEMA's own private label brands. The top two are also ice cream products that HEMA has developed together with suppliers and factories to meet new consumer demands, including the new type of umbrella-shaped ice cream for eating at home that Dongzi just mentioned.
So, to put it simply, as more and more retailers start making their own ice cream, there naturally won't be shelf space left to sell the previous Yili and Mengniu ice creams, so their sales will drop sharply. Right, so there's actually a question here. Why does everyone want to sell ice cream? Is it just because it's a really good business? So can we try to understand it from a business perspective?
Yes, overall, we think ice cream is still a product with high emotional value and the ability to command a premium. So whether it's freshly made ice cream or retail ice cream, within similar product categories, it tends to have high gross margins and high profitability. Let's take freshly made ice cream as an example. Freshly made ice cream is actually a very good business because it has three main characteristics. To sum up, the first is high gross margin, high per capita efficiency, and high per square meter efficiency. If we look at it from the perspective of freshly made ice cream, the gross margin of ice cream is actually significantly higher than that of tea drinks. Due to intense competition and heavy reliance on delivery, many tea drink franchisees see actual gross margins around 50%. In contrast, ice cream brands can achieve gross margins of 65% to 70%. At the same time, compared to tea drinks, ice cream actually requires less space and is easier to operate, which in turn leads to higher efficiency per square meter and per employee. Based on the high gross margin and high efficiency just mentioned, the profit margin of outstanding ice cream stores can even reach 30% to 40%. This high profitability also means a relatively low break-even point for revenue. So we can see that even the leading players in the current ice cream market, such as DQ, may only achieve monthly revenues of around 100,000 to 200,000 yuan, but they are still able to bring very good profits to their stores and franchisees, allowing them to sustain through 5 or even 10-year cycles.
So I think Danny's answer actually addressed this issue from a business perspective and highlighted a characteristic of the ice cream market. But from the demand side, or just off the top of my head, I think the ice cream market is actually a market that continues to grow. This isn't just the case in China. Even in aging societies like Japan, ice cream consumption is still increasing every year. That's quite strange, considering most people are elderly, many can't handle such cold foods anymore, and some might even have diabetes, yet the market keeps growing, and it's been growing for over a decade. Of course, this is just a conclusion I came to off the top of my head. One reason might be that the weather really has been getting hotter, which is a fundamental factor. Besides that, when people feel stressed, when their muscles are tense, they instinctively crave something sweet. This is a very primal need, and eating sweets can actually help relax the muscles. So if you think about it, when the weather gets hotter, people become more irritable, and after becoming irritable, they might crave something sweet. As long as there's something cold to help ease this anxiety, that could be one of the drivers behind it. Of course, how this need translates into the industry and into business is another topic we need to discuss.
I remember we previously had a rough classification where we could divide ice cream into the category of restricted, or more specifically, ice cream from restaurant chains. Regardless of whether it's freshly made or scooped on the spot, we group all of these into this category. And just now, Danny mentioned opening stores, the quick return on investment, and high efficiency. These all actually fall under this framework. Then the other category is the kind of frozen ice cream products that we can buy in supermarkets, convenience stores, or online. These are the packaged ones, usually from bigger brands like Yili, Mengniu, and also Magnum, brands we've grown up eating. Right, these two types of ice cream actually have somewhat different business logics behind them. Actually, as Danny just explained in detail, the brick-and-mortar ice cream shop model is even more efficient than the tea shop model. That's why many new brands are starting to open ice cream stores in shopping malls. Yes, that's one type. At the same time, frozen packaged ice cream is also going through a process of renewal and upgrading. As we mentioned earlier, a clear trend is that proprietary channels, including convenience stores like Hema, are starting to launch their own ice cream products, replacing the previous ice cream brands. So what I actually want to ask here is, why are we seeing such a significant change at this particular point in time? Is it related to what Dongzi mentioned earlier about Japan's lost decade and the timing of that period?
I do believe that the turning point China is experiencing now is indeed related to what I just mentioned about Japan's lost decade. One point I didn't mention earlier is that in fact Japanese ice cream brands like Meiji and Lotte weren't really putting much effort into making ice cream, at least not before the lost decade hit its lowest point. The reason is that at the time, the dairy companies were doing exceptionally well. Since ice cream is made from dairy products, a lot of the ingredients used in ice cream actually come from byproducts of fresh milk, or from ingredients that aren't of the highest grade, which end up being used in ice cream. So, ice cream was more of a product for kids or young people to eat, something that companies would just make on the side without putting much emphasis on it. It wasn't really taken very seriously as a product. And this kind of significant attention probably isn't something a retail brand can create on its own. It might require a strong food service brand to first educate consumers, to show them that ice cream can actually have such high value, that there are delicious flavors and all kinds of variety. Then, after that, retail ice cream, the frozen package kind, can try to catch up with restaurant-style ice cream through its own R&D and innovation. I think there's a connection like this between the two.
I completely agree with what Dongzi just said. From our own observations, it seems that starting from the year before last to last year, the freshly made ice cream market began to experience rapid growth. And this year, in the retail channels, we've noticed that retail ice cream has also followed this trend. Just as Dongzi mentioned, some freshly made ice cream brands have been leading the way by opening stores, which helps to educate the market and consumers as a whole. Once this trend takes hold, people are more likely to buy ice cream when they're at the mall, and when they get home, they want to repurchase it. Some of this repeat demand will naturally flow toward retail ice cream products.
This point is actually quite interesting. Isn't it similar to what happened with tea drinks back then? There seemed to be a similar trend where the new style tea brands at the front end were innovating with all kinds of different flavors. Once these new flavors were validated by the market, traditional bottled beverage companies would learn from and adopt them. So here, I'd like to ask Danny to summarize for us. Why is it that low-calorie ice cream has seen such rapid growth this year or in the past couple of years?
We noticed the growth of the low-calorie ice cream industry actually at the beginning of last year. At that time, our overall assessment was that there was a trend-driven opportunity for the entire category. On the surface, as Xiaoqi mentioned, we've seen many brands develop rapidly, but actually the underlying reason, we believe, is partly the rise of emotional consumption. Ice cream, much like the surprise of a blind box, actually has a lipstick effect. In other words, it can provide consumers with instant gratification and small moments of happiness. The second point is that consumers actually crave new stimulation. Tea drinks have already become overly competitive. From the fruit teas we know to light milk teas and fruit and vegetable teas, it's actually quite hard to come up with new variations. But new ice cream brands are able to bring a sense of novelty to consumers. From the perspective of category rotation in the broader beverage sector, ice cream has actually entered a new cycle. From the popularity of tea drinks to the current craze for ice cream, we see this as a normal process of category migration and rotation. Finally, from the channel perspective, shopping malls also need new ice cream brands, and franchisees are seeking better investment products. So both shopping malls and the core group of franchisees opening stores in Chinese shopping centers are driving the growth of this category. For example, in the past few years, we've seen that the first floor of a shopping mall might have 3 or even 5 coffee shops or milk tea stores. However, there hasn't really been a new ice cream brand. Maybe there's a DQ, but it's usually tucked away in an inconspicuous spot in the mall. However, as the tea beverage market becomes increasingly saturated and diluted, shouldn't the first floor of shopping malls also have 1 or even 1 or 2 ice cream brands? We believe there is a trend and opportunity for such development.
Yes, actually, as we just discussed, some of the current ice cream brands in restaurant chains are leading the way and innovating in terms of flavors. Can we perhaps summarize whether there is a major trend right now specifically in terms of flavors?
I think when it comes to ice cream flavors, on one hand, they're actually going through a process of becoming more like tea beverages because we know that new product launches in the tea beverage industry are extremely competitive, right? For example, seasonal fruits like peaches, bayberries, and matcha, these are now being incorporated into the new product strategies of ice cream brands as well. They're starting to combine seasonal fruits with traditional ice cream flavors. Another aspect, I think, is the exploration of localized flavors. For instance, take the pistachio from Xinli, which integrates nuts more seamlessly into the creamy texture of dairy-based ice cream. This also includes some domestic brands now promoting ice cream with Wuchang rice flavor, which is a distinctly Chinese and highly localized taste. I think more and more of these original, authentic ingredients from our daily lives will likely be incorporated into ice cream flavors.
This trend is actually quite interesting because we all know that ice cream is an imported product. When we were kids, the most traditional Chinese frozen treats were probably popsicles or those, what do you call them, just blocks of ice. So this kind of creamy, dairy-based texture, ice cream as we know it, is itself a foreign import. And now we're starting to see some innovations that are distinctly Chinese. So, as another East Asian country, as Dongzi mentioned earlier, the Japanese ice cream market is also quite competitive. Did Japan go through a similar phase as well?
Japan has actually gone through a whole phase of localizing the ice cream category. If we just think about it, I don't know if you've ever tried this. Maybe it's called shui mei niang in China. It's that snack with glutinous rice on the outside and ice cream on the inside. That's a very typical example of a Japanese-style localized ice cream product.
Daifuku.
Daifuku, right? Ice cream daifuku.
Oh, so that's considered ice cream?
It's ice cream inside and mochi on the outside.
So, what's the current state of the ice cream market in Japan? Is it, for example, dominated by foreign brands, or have local brands managed to come out on top?
Let's break it down. If we look at retail ice cream, the top companies are basically all local, except for Häagen-Dazs. Companies like Meiji, Lotte, and Sanriku Sika make up the majority. Only Häagen-Dazs stands out, with about 2.6 billion RMB in revenue in Japan, dominating the high-end retail ice cream market there. As for the food service ice cream segment, Japan can actually be viewed from 2 perspectives. One is the restaurant-style chains, such as Baskin Robbins, which has about 1,000 stores. This is also the only large-scale ice cream chain brand in Japan. That's from the restaurant perspective. But in fact, Japan has a very unique model as well, which is what they call the Japanese-style ice cream supplier. These suppliers provide ice cream machines, ingredients, and cones to various restaurants, highway service areas, and even retail outlets across the country, enabling them to sell ice cream. This is a business model that sits between the restaurant and retail sectors, and companies in this space have a market size of nearly 2.2 billion RMB.
Yes, Dongzi just mentioned freshly made ice cream. In Japan, there's actually a brand called Sanai Ice Cream that's doing quite well. Could you elaborate on what kind of brand this is and what makes it so good?
Yes, it really is a very unique case. Baskin Robbins is an ice cream brand that originated in the United States, and now it has over 1,000 stores in Japan. It mainly operates through a franchise model, and the total sales of its stores amount to about 3 billion RMB, which already makes it the largest in Japan. Based on our past experience, having 1,000 stores in Japan gives a sense of scale that's quite similar to the feeling of a 10,000 store chain in China, especially in terms of density. Actually, I think its biggest feature in Japan is that it has managed to survive smoothly. Rather than saying it has won many battles, it's more accurate to say it has simply survived. Because in the 1970s, when 31, that is Baskin Robbins, entered the Japanese market, other brands like DQ and Häagen-Dazs also entered Japan one after another. But in the end, they all withdrew, and only this one brand survived. So it naturally became the leader in the industry.
So is this a compelling story of a local brand successfully defeating foreign brands in the market?
Baskin Robbins is actually an American brand, so this is actually a story of a foreign brand defeating other foreign brands through localization.
Because it's also a joint venture, partnering with local companies.
Yes, Baskin Robbins in Japan was established in cooperation with Fujiya, a well-known confectionery and snack brand. So, from very early on, they actively incorporated Japanese products and business models into their operations. This is also one of the reasons why they're different from other brands. When it comes to Baskin Robbins localization, we can analyze it from two perspectives. The first is the localization of its products. For example, just like the domestic localization we mentioned earlier, they've launched many flavors such as matcha, matcha Oreo, almond tofu, and so on. These are all very localized flavors. This actually aligns with one of Baskin Robbins' strategic features. The 31 means there's a new flavor every day, so you could have a different one each day of the month. For this brand, about 20 of the flavors are stable, while 11 flavors are basically rotated every month. And many of these monthly rotating flavors are supported by new localized products. In addition to this, when it comes to product localization, they also actively collaborate with some well-known IPs. Recently, they launched a collaboration with Mario, featuring very bright colors reminiscent of Mario, and even released co-branded ice cream cakes, which also give people a very joyful impression of the brand. This also helps the brand secure a place in the minds of its users. As for the product's characteristics, the slogan of the entire Baskin Robbins brand is, "We make people happy." It's very straightforward, but it truly is the company's slogan. So I remember when I was in high school, whenever students heard that we were going to have Baskin Robbins after school, everyone would get really excited and say, we're going to Baskin Robbins, let's all go together. Indeed, through the localization of its products and the deepening of its brand image in Japan, it has become a symbol of happiness. That's the first point. The second point, when it comes to localization, I think it's more about the localization of its franchise system. In terms of the franchise system, it's actually a fairly common model in the food and beverage industry. But here, there's a point where Japan's experience might not be exactly the same as China's. In Japan, the franchise system, or rather, the food and beverage industry, has gone through both a period of growth and a period of decline. When we look at the franchise system now, we tend to view it positively, thinking about how to use low-cost, rapid expansion and leverage franchisees. But in Japan, they tend to look at this issue from the opposite perspective. Namely, if a downturn happens, how can I withstand such a period of decline? And in fact, this approach by Baskin Robbins works even better during downturns. Of course, it's effective during periods of growth, but in times of recession, when other brand headquarters are still negotiating and struggling with their franchisees, Baskin Robbins is quite unique. After some negotiation, the brand makes certain concessions and then forms a mutually beneficial relationship with franchisees. They invest in advertising together, and the headquarters subsidizes franchisees to help with store renovations and other related work. So compared to the traditional adversarial relationship often seen in the restaurant industry, they treat their franchisees more like family. This approach further strengthens the brand's operational advantages and also boosts franchisee loyalty. From this perspective, its approach to localizing the entire franchise system is also very different from other brands like DQ or Häagen-Dazs. Baskin Robbins operates more like a family, providing a lot of support and services to its franchisees. What I just talked about was how Baskin Robbins managed to survive by localizing its operations.
Yes, actually, Dongzi just shared with us a really interesting story about how a Japanese ice cream brand localized itself and managed to beat out foreign brands. I found that quite fascinating. So what I want to ask is, are we seeing similar changes happening in the Chinese ice cream market right now? Because we can clearly feel it ourselves. First of all, as everyone knows, Häagen-Dazs isn't doing so well anymore. Although it was once synonymous with premium ice cream in many people's minds, we've also noticed that ice cream consumption hasn't disappeared. Instead, it may have shifted to some other brands. So why are these changes happening? And what advantages do our domestic new brands actually have compared to the previous generation of brands?
Right, because as we just mentioned, we're now in the third wave of ice cream in China. Actually, Häagen-Dazs is definitely a prominent representative of the second wave, a premium retail ice cream brand with a very high-end image and sophisticated positioning. It successfully introduced a luxurious Western imported product to discerning Chinese consumers, who were more than willing to pay a significant premium to enthusiastically try something novel and truly enjoy it as a delightful leisure experience, savoring every moment. But in the third wave, the new freshly made brands we see now, whether they are foreign, high-end or innovative local brands, are actually offering products that are healthier and tastier than Häagen-Dazs. At the same time, they may also have a price advantage compared to Häagen-Dazs. They are cheaper, taste better, and can provide even more emotional value to consumers. So I think, at its core, this is really about iteration and innovation in the product itself. And then these new Chinese ice cream brands, for example, those making matcha ice cream, might launch a hugely popular matcha ice cream product, while those focusing on pistachio might have a hit pistachio flavor, right? Those making black tea flavors might have a hit black tea product, and by creating and developing these blockbuster products, they further drive the growth of their brand. Nowadays, when we eat ice cream, it's often more about tasting a particular flavor or having a certain experience, right? Or even about satisfying a certain mood. I think beyond the product itself, there is an evolving demand for something different on a spiritual level. As people's material needs are being met, I feel that the focus is gradually shifting toward fulfilling spiritual needs as well.
I want to ask, is this somewhat similar to how, in the past, we would go eat Häagen-Dazs mainly because it was a high-end, expensive brand and we wanted that feeling? But now, when it comes to ice cream, we really just want to try a certain flavor, or we want something fresher. It's the taste itself that draws us in. So, is it that the underlying logic of your consumption behavior is a little different now?
Yes, I think so. Now, in the entire consumer market, whether it's in supermarkets or shopping malls, I think we've already entered a buyer's market. It's product-driven, consumer-driven. These definitely outweigh brand-driven consumption. At the same time, the innovation and product capabilities of this new generation of Chinese brands have actually surpassed those of traditional foreign brands. So when it comes to foreign brands like Häagen-Dazs and DQ, I believe that today's Chinese consumers are no longer enchanted by them at all. On the contrary, Chinese consumers now tend to favor our local brands.
I find this point really interesting. Häagen-Dazs once opened a large number of stores in Japan, but in 2013 it closed its last store there, stating that it had fulfilled its historical mission. Why do they say that? They think, well, since I've already established my brand in the minds of these customers through my stores, then from now on, when I do business in Japan, I won't focus on running limited stores anymore. Instead, I want to move into the business of retail products. Actually, this is the same trend that's happening in China right now. Although on the surface they say they're done and have fulfilled their historical mission, in reality it's because consumers have become somewhat disenchanted with the brand and have grown more mature.
So, in the minds of Japanese consumers, what kind of brand is Häagen-Dazs?
It's pretty much the same as in China. It's considered a relatively high-end ice cream brand. So, for example, when it comes to ice cream of the same portion size, Häagen-Dazs might sell for 300 yen, while other brands might be 150 yen. There's still nearly a twofold price difference.
So, it's even more expensive than brands like Meiji?
If Meiji is 150 yen, then Häagen-Dazs is 300 yen.
Oh, I see. What Dongzi mentioned earlier, can I understand it this way? Häagen-Dazs couldn't keep its stores open in Japan, but since its brand is already well known, it decided to just sell ice cream products. It doesn't need to operate its own stores anymore. Instead, it can simply place freezers in convenience stores to sell its products.
Yes, not only can they just put a freezer there, but they can also charge an even higher premium. Of course, compared to China, this premium is still relatively lower because Häagen-Dazs is produced locally in Japan rather than being imported. So it's actually using local ingredients to justify this premium, and it still maintains a pretty good profit margin.
Right, so what I'm really curious about here is, why is it that even Häagen-Dazs feels like it can't keep its stores open anymore? Because we all know that Häagen-Dazs has extremely high profit margins on its ice cream, so what kind of business is it really to run an ice cream shop? Why is it that even Häagen-Dazs can't keep its stores running?
I think the reason Häagen-Dazs can't keep its stores open isn't because the ice cream business itself is bad, but because the Häagen-Dazs brand is being rapidly abandoned by consumers. As investors, we might look at the single store model and cost structure of different businesses, but when consumers abandon you, once you lose the revenue from your stores, no matter how good your cost structure is, it all becomes meaningless.
Could you break it down for us a bit? Like, if I want to open a freshly made ice cream shop, how would I go about calculating the costs and profits? For example, if I want to open a store now, I might have a lot of options in front of me, like tea shops, coffee shops, or even small restaurants. So, what kind of business is an ice cream shop, roughly speaking?
I think we can compare ice cream shops with tea shops. For example, let's say both are stores of about 30 to 50 square meters, whether it's an ice cream shop or a tea shop. Looking at it today, their setup costs are probably quite similar, since tea shops need tea making equipment, while ice cream shops might need ice cream machines. If you use domestic ice cream equipment opening a 50 square meter shop, the initial investment might be similar to that of a tea shop, probably around 500,000 to 600,000 yuan. But compared to tea shops, I think ice cream shops still have two significant advantages. The first is gross profit. At least in today's market environment, or at the current stage of development for these two categories, the gross profit margin for ice cream is significantly higher than that of tea drinks. Because as we know, for leading tea brands, due to intense competition and heavy reliance on delivery platforms, if you look at it from a franchisee's perspective, the actual gross profit margin is about 50% when you open a tea shop franchise now. If it's a bit higher, it might reach 55% or 60%. Right, but for ice cream shops, the gross profit margin can actually reach 65% to 70%. Of course, this is also related to the stage of development of the entire ice cream industry and the degree of competition within the industry. But as of today, if I open an ice cream shop, my gross profit margin could be 15 percentage points higher than that of a tea shop, or even 20 points higher. In addition, compared to tea shops, operating an ice cream shop is actually more convenient. As we know, for example, with tea drinks like fruit tea, you might need to cut and prepare the fruit, and the process can be relatively complicated. Now, Bawang has actually further simplified the process of making tea drinks by using milk tea machines, but there are still some steps like blending and packaging involved. But from the perspective of ice cream, we can see that whether it's Häagen-Dazs, Deco, or some of the newer ice cream brands, most of them simply scoop ice cream in the store. So when you scoop a bowl of ice cream, compared to making a cup of milk tea, the process is actually more efficient. So we see that for a milk tea shop with the same income of 2 to 300,000, it might need 5 to 6 staff members, while an ice cream shop might only need 2 to 3. Therefore, in terms of labor efficiency and per store efficiency, ice cream shops are actually significantly higher than tea beverage shops. Because of the high gross margin and more streamlined staffing for tea shops and ice cream shops with potentially the same performance, the profit margin of the ice cream shop will also be significantly higher than that of the tea shop. We know that a well-performing ice cream shop can have a profit margin as high as 30% to 40%. Such high profitability also means that the break-even point for ice cream shops is relatively low. In other words, even if an ice cream shop only makes sales of 100,000 to 200,000 yuan, it can still earn a pretty decent monthly profit of 50 to 60,000 yuan. So we see that today, there are many deco stores whose performance may not be as high as people imagine, but they are able to survive cycles of 5 or even 10 years.
Since we've mentioned that this ice cream shop business is quite a good opportunity, on the flip side, does that mean that more people might rush into this market once they see such an opportunity? After all, it offers a high enough gross margin, and perhaps that high margin exists because the competition in the market isn't fierce enough yet. Is it possible that someone will further segment this market? Or perhaps by starting a price war or using other tactics, the overall industry profits could be driven down?
Yes, I think just as Dongzi mentioned, when it comes to a good business, there will definitely be a steady stream of new players entering the market. Everyone will try to carve up and eat into the market using different positioning and price ranges. But I think that for ice cream, it also has its own category limitations, which ultimately means it won't produce as many leading brands as tea drinks. The reason for this is that tea drinks and milk tea have actually become a daily necessity in China. For example, among the people around us, and maybe we ourselves are moderate or even heavy consumers, we might drink it every day, right? Or at the very least, you'll have it every week. Some heavy consumers might drink several cups a day. This is a pretty high frequency consumption pattern. But ice cream, by its very nature, is consumed less frequently. Basically, it's something people have on a monthly basis. Right, we can also think about our own habits. How often do we actually eat ice cream, right? In the past month, how many cups of milk tea have you had? And how many times have you eaten ice cream? I believe the frequency of ice cream consumption is probably less than 1/10 of that of milk tea. Right, so this difference in frequency is also a factor. That's why the market size for ice cream is still quite small. In terms of store sales, it's probably only between 20 to 30 billion yuan, which is less than 1/10 of the tea beverage market. Therefore, it's actually not easy to scale up a relatively low-frequency business. Unlike tea beverages, where I might find a niche entry point or a specific positioning, and I can capture a group of people with a strong demand for tea drinks, which allows me to achieve considerable sales and open quite a few stores. Hundreds of stores, right? But in the low-frequency ice cream business, it's actually not easy to scale up and open many stores. You need to put effort into your products and services, which will test whether your product can stand out from the competition. For example, if there are 3 ice cream shops in front of you, why would I choose yours instead of buying a cheaper ice cream from the shop next door? So your product needs to be sufficiently differentiated and attractive. Secondly, because consumption is very infrequent, you need to be able to reach a large enough audience. For example, you need to have the appeal of a trendy Instagrammable spot to attract young women, while at the same time you might also need to offer some healthy options. Nutritional concepts like these can also be incorporated, so you can appeal to families and attract children, as well as, like Dongzi just mentioned, possibly meet the needs of elderly people. Only if your product stands out and at the same time covers a sufficiently broad consumer base can you grow into a truly vibrant brand. You need to be able to open enough of these kinds of stores. So I think, just as you said, price competition and internal rivalry are definitely unavoidable, but in the end, making it in this industry might require even more effort than building a tea beverage brand.
Actually, there's a point I've been thinking about. If I were to create a premium ice cream brand, does that mean I can only go in the high value direction? Because I noticed a set of data, like we mentioned earlier. Making ice cream is very simple. As long as I have an ice cream machine, I can basically handle the whole process. In comparison, a tea shop can actually cover a wider range of consumers and has a larger sales network. So as long as I put an ice cream machine in my tea shop, I can sell ice cream. If we look at Mengniu, for example, in the first 9 months of last year, they sold a total of 1.4 billion ice creams. That means out of every 10 soft-serve ice creams, more than 3 came from Mengniu, which is an enormous quantity. Also, when we go to KFC or McDonald's, people often get a cone or something like that too, right? Sundays and things like that, including McFlurries. So actually, I'm wondering, for our current soft-serve ice cream brands, isn't a better direction to move toward higher value? Like you said, if the product is differentiated enough and has a strong sense of value, maybe that's the way to go.
Yes, I think at this stage of the market, brands like Mengniu, which is known for its soft serve, are representative. Actually, Mengniu's slogan is ice cream and tea. Ice cream is also one of its signature products as it expands globally. And as Xiaoqi just mentioned, KFC and McDonald's McFlurries, these ice creams priced around 5 to 10 yuan, are still the mainstream in the market. So for new brands that want to enter the big ice cream market now, right, it might still be more promising to position themselves as mid to high end. That's why we also see many new brands focusing more on the concept of gelato. This differentiates them from brands like Mengniu and also from McDonald's soft serve. Now more brands are moving toward hard ice cream or gelato, setting themselves apart from Mengniu and McDonald's soft serve and focusing more in that direction to position their own brand and expand their product line.
Here, actually, I'd like to take advantage of what Danny just mentioned and elaborate on my own thoughts. I think the demand for ice cream often arises quite randomly. It's a bit like I suddenly get a craving, like I say, I have an attack, and at a certain moment, I just really want to eat ice cream. So, because of this randomness, it's not that I purposefully set out to eat ice cream, but rather that it just comes to mind. Or, for example, when I'm out shopping and I see it, I suddenly want to eat it. So at this point, whether your ice cream brand can occupy a spot in the consumer's mind becomes extremely important. When they see it, they immediately think, I want to eat that. This also means that the brand actually needs to put in quite a lot of effort in its marketing. So in terms of results, I need to get closer to the consumer so that they see me as much as possible and feel like eating my product. At the same time, when they see it, they should feel, hey, eating this will make me happy. That means I need to make good choices and do a good job with marketing. Ultimately, this also means my gross margin has to be high. Otherwise, where would these costs come from? In other words, for these limited edition ice creams, you still have to go for a mid to high-end pricing strategy in order to survive. I'm not sure if this line of reasoning is correct or not.
I think it's hard to draw a conclusion right now about what the final price positioning of ice cream will be in the future, because the ultimate price positioning is definitely closely tied to consumers' willingness and ability to pay. In any mass market, it's always the mainstream positioning that captures the largest share of the market. However, during the market introduction phase, you need heavier marketing and more product innovation. As Dongzi just mentioned, your positioning may need to be mid to high end so that you have enough resources and budget to invest in and kickstart the market. But I especially agree with what Dongzi just said, that ice cream is actually more of a spontaneous purchase. Recently, we've also been researching the situation of various ice cream brands. We've conducted extensive user research and even interviewed many store owners. We found that the same brand, when opened in different locations and settings, can have vastly different performance. For example, we looked at an ice cream brand with 2 of its best locations in Beijing, one in the office building with the highest foot traffic and the other in the busiest commercial street. But in the end, the performance of these 2 stores differed by 3 to 4 times in revenue. Even though the foot traffic was similar, the sales differed by 3 to 4 times. We started to analyze the reasons behind this. So we found that the foot traffic in the commercial street actually has more of a leisure attribute. People are there to stroll around and shop. Ice cream is actually the perfect match for these people's spontaneous shopping and consumption needs. Since they're already there, of course they're going to buy something, right? Ice cream might be the lowest cost leisure option for me, a way to treat myself to a little dopamine boost and happiness. But among the large crowds in office areas, people are more likely to be looking for a work meal or a coffee to stay alert and energized. They might not really be in the mood to buy an ice cream. So I think this actually gives us a lot of inspiration. Ice cream is a delightful product that can provide significant emotional value, so it should be sold more in places where people are genuinely happier and more relaxed and at ease.
Yes, we've actually just talked quite a bit about the issue of ice cream pricing. Actually, when it comes to ice cream, there's another very common question that I'd like to discuss with both of you. That is, the ice cream business, we used to think it might be like selling down jackets, for example, where there's a very strong seasonal effect. So I'm not quite sure because it's different from tea drinks. With tea, you can sell hot drinks in winter and cold drinks in summer, right? But with ice cream, you just can't do that. So I'm not sure if I open a store that only sells ice cream, would I also face the risk of such seasonal fluctuations?
Yes, just as Xiaoqi said, if we look at the entire ice cream industry, ice cream definitely sells better in the summer. In the winter, sales are affected by the weather, so there is a certain seasonality, especially for street-side ice cream shops. In summer, sales might be double those of winter, and this is determined by objective weather factors. But if we look at the data from some leading shopping malls, we might even find that in these malls, ice cream shops actually perform better in winter than in summer. The reason for this, as Dongzi just mentioned, is that ice cream is actually a kind of impulse purchase. When I enter the spacious shopping mall, the comfortable heating inside allows me to truly enjoy delicious ice cream all year round, so my ultimate decision to purchase is actually determined by my immediate mood at the precise moment I see it. So why is business even better in winter? It's actually because winter often has the Christmas season and various marketing events. For example, during Christmas, when you see an ice cream shop decorated with Christmas trees and vibrant colors, and the ice cream is promoted with appealing marketing that offers you greater emotional value, you'll feel more motivated to buy an ice cream. So we actually see that in shopping malls, during the festivals and events in the second half of the year, ice cream sales might be even better. Right, so from a macro perspective, there is definitely seasonality. But from a micro perspective, if we can identify the underlying motivations behind consumers' purchasing decisions for ice cream and provide them with products and emotional value that specifically target those needs, we can actually stimulate and convert their consumption.
Actually, I have a personal experience related to this. You'll notice that ice cream brands put in a lot of effort to make you forget that ice cream is a seasonal product. I remember when I was a kid, there was one birthday that left a deep impression on me. My sister invited me to have a Häagen-Dazs ice cream hot pot. That's what it was called, but actually, it had nothing to do with hot pot at all. Yeah, but you see, putting those two words together is really interesting. Ice cream and hot pot together make it feel like the thing isn't that cold. It doesn't really feel like ice cream. So I was thinking maybe ice cream can also go in other directions. Like Dongzi mentioned earlier, in Japan, there are products like Yukimi Daifuku, which don't really feel like such cold ice cream anymore.
That reminds me, actually, in winter, Japanese convenience stores sell roasted sweet potato flavored ice cream. The whole thing is shaped just like a roasted sweet potato, but you don't really feel like it's ice cream.
Yes, exactly. If we look at the domestic market now, there are many brands that have expanded from ice cream to ice cream cake products. Whether it's DQ, Häagen-Dazs, or Pobeice's ice cream cakes, or Yaren's ice cream cakes, their sales in the market have actually been very good. When delightful ice cream and delicious cake are thoughtfully combined, it actually balances out the overall texture, making it significantly less cold and more palatable, while also bringing forth a wider array of delightful flavors and a truly richer, more satisfying taste experience to the entire cake.
Just talking about ice cream today, just mentioning this topic, seems to have a kind of magical power that makes people happy, right? After we finish chatting and recording this podcast, let's go have some ice cream. Yes, and actually, lately everyone has been mentioning a term, the beauty of economic upturns. But I'm wondering, isn't ice cream actually a kind of emotional value during economic downturns? Or maybe it's a kind of lipstick effect? It's like precisely when the overall environment feels a bit dull and uninspiring, you find yourself wanting an ice cream even more.
I think from a global perspective, ice cream is actually a counter-cyclical category. And looking at global data after the 2008 financial crisis, ice cream actually experienced rapid growth against the trend. Dongzi, maybe you can also share whether during Japan's so-called lost decade, or even 30 years, ice cream showed a similar trend, including from my own experience and from friends around me, for example. When the overall industry and economy were doing well, people's desire or willingness to spend was actually greatly boosted. When we went to Sanlitun, maybe your goal for shopping that day was to buy something a bit more expensive, like some clothes or a light luxury bag. But when your wallet gets tighter, maybe I'll still go to Sanlitun, but I'll shop less frequently. However, if I see an ice cream, whether it's 30 yuan or 50 yuan, I feel that in this kind of situation, my willingness to spend on something like that is still there. I mean, I can't buy a handbag anymore, but I can buy an ice cream. I can spend 30 or 50 yuan to give myself a little emotional high point during today's shopping trip. Right, so I think this category is really like Pop Mart's blind boxes. It's a little moment of happiness. I think it's a similar kind of emotional consumption experience.
Everyone says that Japan's economy has lost 30 years, but ice cream has only lost 10 years, which shows it's still a pretty good business.
So can we say that China's ice cream industry has also reached a similar turning point and that it might see unexpected growth in the future?
I think, looking at the overall rotation of categories, there is indeed such an opportunity. Today we see that tea beverage brands may have reached their peak, and now it's more about competing for existing market share. The overall growth of the ice cream sector definitely surpasses that of tea beverages. We even have friends around us who are in the ice cream equipment business, and they've reported that since last year, demand has basically outstripped supply. More and more people are asking to order ice cream machines from them. Judging from this kind of enthusiasm for upstream orders, it's clear that this category is experiencing rapid growth.
So aside from the emotional value we just mentioned, or the so-called lipstick effect during economic downturns, are there any other reasons behind the rapid growth of this category?
I think on the consumer side, as everyone can see, there are indeed some signs of growth. On the supply side, from the perspective of distribution channels, as I mentioned earlier, shopping malls actually need new ice cream brands. Those opening stores in shopping malls are also seeking better investment opportunities. Right, when your ice cream shop can deliver better returns than tea shops or other food and beverage outlets, I believe most entrepreneurs will gravitate toward this sector, which in turn collectively drives the development of the category. Especially now, domestic brands are also lowering the cost of opening ice cream shops through innovations in equipment. For example, a Deco ice cream machine might cost over 100,000 or even 200,000 yuan, and a single store may need 2 or more machines, right? But now, with domestic equipment, we can significantly lower the cost of ice cream machines, which greatly reduces the overall cost of opening an ice cream shop. At the same time, domestic brands don't charge the high brand management fees, marketing fees, or franchise fees that foreign brands do. Better cooperation terms, more localized product innovation and marketing will also help all participants make more money in the ice cream business and provide great opportunities for the development of domestic brands.
Since Danny put it that way, it looks like there will be even more new ice cream options in China in the future. This new supply of ice cream could mean we'll get to try flavors we've never had before, which is really something to look forward to.
All right, let's wrap up now and go have some ice cream. Okay, goodbye everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye for now, everyone, all of you.